I used to believe the only thing I raised in that cramped apartment was my safety net for old age. Instead, my son became a tech millionaire and fired me from his life like an expired contract. I thought I had lost everything until his fiancée pulled me aside at their engagement party and whispered, "Are you the mother of—" That unfinished question blew open a past I had buried deep, along with a revenge plan cold enough to freeze hell. My name is Nora Gallagher. I am 58 years old, and my hair has turned the color of the cheap aluminum coins I count every night at the discount grocery store on the frayed edge of Denver. Most women my age are planning cruises or knitting blankets for grandchildren. But I spend my nights scanning cans of beans for people who count pennies just like I do. It is a far cry from the life I thought I had secured when I poured every drop of my youth into raising my only son. The envelope arrived at my basement apartment last week. It was thick cream cardstock that felt heavy with money, addressed to me in a calligraphy so precise it had to be a machine. Inside was an invitation to the engagement party of Ethan Gallagher, the CEO of Northline Vision. There was no handwritten note, no apology for the silence that had stretched over the last 8 months, and certainly no check. There was only a small, typed insert that read, "Mom, if you want to come, please notify in advance so security can update the guest list." I stared at that card under the flickering yellow light of my kitchen. It was the final confirmation that I was no longer a mother to him. I was a potential security risk. I remembered the day he fired me from his life. It was a Tuesday. He did not yell or scream. He simply sat across from me in the house I had paid off, but foolishly put in his name, and explained that he was cutting my access to our joint accounts. He called it financial restructuring. He called my eviction a necessary step for tax optimization. He looked at me with the same detached focus he used to debug code and deleted me. I did not cry that day. I just felt a cold numbness, like I was an old velvet sofa that had been dragged out to the curb on trash day because it no longer matched the modern decor. I decided to go to the party anyway. I did not go because I missed him. I went because I had to see the life he had purchased with my sacrifice. I wanted to see the woman who made him believe that discarding his mother was a logical business decision. The hotel in downtown Denver smelled of expensive lilies and old money. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto a crowd of investors and tech moguls who held their champagne flutes like weapons. I stood near a marble pillar in a navy dress I had bought 3 seasons ago, feeling invisible. Then Ethan stepped onto the stage. He looked handsome in a tuxedo that cost more than my entire year of wages. He raised a glass and smiled that charming smile that used to melt my heart when he was a boy. I built Northline Vision from nothing, he told the crowd, his voice smooth and practiced. It takes sacrifice to walk the path of a self-made man. It takes cutting away the dead weight so you can fly. He did not mention the woman who scrubbed toilets in 3 different hotels so he could go to math camp. He did not look at me. That was when I saw her. Camilla Reyes. She was standing near the front, looking up at him not with adoration, but with a strange, analytical distance. She was stunning in a quiet way, a doctor of psychology at the Morganfield Institute, according to the whispers I heard. She did not look like the other trophy wives in the room. Her eyes were sharp and dark. I could not stomach it anymore. The lies tasted like ash in my throat. I turned to leave, desperate to get back to the cold comfort of my basement before I made a scene. I was halfway down the empty service corridor when a hand caught my elbow. It was Camilla, up close. She smelled like rain and antiseptic. She looked at my face. searching for something in my tired eyes. "Mrs. Gallagher?" she said softly. "I am leaving," I said, pulling my arm back. "I am not on the security list anymore." She stepped closer, invading my personal space. She looked terrified and determined all at once. She leaned in until her breath tickled my ear. "Are you the mother of—" she started, her voice trembling. She paused, and I could feel the heat radiating from her. "Are you the mother of—" "Adam Gallagher." The name hit me like a physical blow. The air left my lungs. Adam, my first boy. The one who had been buried for 25 years. The one Ethan never spoke of. "How do you know that name?" I whispered, my voice breaking. Camilla squeezed my hand hard, her nails digging into my palm. "Because," she whispered, her voice shaking with a rage that matched my own. "He did not die by accident." That name, Adam, ripped a hole in the present. But to understand why I was standing there shaking in a service hallway, you have to go back to the years when my hands were still smooth and my back was not constantly aching. We lived in Redford, Colorado, a town that smelled perpetually of pine sawdust and cold rain. After my husband died in a construction accident that the company called unforeseeable to avoid paying a full pension, I became a machine built for survival. I did the bookkeeping for the local lumber yard during the day, waited tables at the diner until 9 at night, and scrubbed toilets at the motel on weekends. I did it all to keep Ethan fed and clothed, to keep the cold wind from whistling through the cracks in our rental walls. Our apartment was so small that for years we shared a single queen mattress. I would sit up late with my ledgers, calculating how to stretch $20 into a week of groceries, while Ethan lay on his stomach beside me, doing his math homework. He was brilliant even then. The hum of the refrigerator was our soundtrack. I remember one night, he looked up from his notebook, his eyes wide and serious for a 10-year-old. "Mom," he said, tapping his pencil against the page. "One day, I am going to buy you a house with a kitchen so big, you will need a map to find the stove." I laughed and kissed his forehead, holding on to that promise like a lifeline through every double shift and every humiliating moment a customer yelled at me for cold coffee. Then came Ashwood College. It was a private business school with tuition that cost more than I made in 3 years. I cut every corner imaginable. I stopped buying meat. I took a 4th job doing the books for the local church. I sent every cent to him so he could walk around campus in decent shoes and pretend he was not the son of a maid. But when he came home for the summers, he was different. He spoke a language I did not understand, full of words like seed capital and return on investment. He stopped hugging me as soon as he walked in the door. I told myself it was just him growing up, that this coldness was the price of his success. When he graduated, he did not look for a job. He came to me with a business plan for something called Northline Vision. He sat me down at our scarred kitchen table and held my calloused hands. "Mom," he said, his voice dropping to that persuasive register he had perfected. "The banks do not see the vision. But you always believed in me. If you sell the house here, we can use that equity. It is the only way to make your money actually grow. I will give you shares. You will be an owner." I was terrified. That tiny house in Redford was the only thing I owned. But I looked at his face, the face of the boy who promised me a big kitchen, and I signed the papers. We moved to Denver. When Northline Vision took off, the money poured in like a flood. Ethan bought a sprawling estate in Hawthorne Ridge. It had 5 bedrooms and a kitchen out of a magazine. I am putting the deed in my name, Mom, he told me as we unpacked. It is just for liability protection. You know how people like to sue wealthy tech founders. This keeps our home safe. I believed him. I scrubbed the marble floors of that mansion with the same vigor I had scrubbed the motel toilets, thinking I was polishing our legacy. But the cracks started to show in the silence. One evening, I walked past his home office and heard him on the phone. His voice was low, annoyed. I know the cap table looks messy. He was saying, I am handling the old lady shares issue. She is not going to be a problem for the Series B round. I froze. When he came out, I asked him who he was talking to. Just a difficult client. Mum, he said, flashing a tight, plastic smile. Do not worry your head about business. The end of my life as I knew it happened on a Tuesday night, though I did not know it then. Ethan came home with a bottle of expensive wine and a heavy black box. He opened it to reveal a fountain pen that probably cost $2,000. He laid a stack of documents on the kitchen island. I need to consolidate some of the holding structures, he said, uncapping the pen for me. It is just technical paperwork to make the taxes easier. Sign here and here. It will just streamline everything for us. I looked at the dense paragraphs of legal jargon. I did not understand a word of it. But I looked at my son, the boy I had shared a bed with, the boy I had broken my back for. I took the pen. Is this good for us? I asked. It is the best thing for the future, he said, his eyes never meeting mine. I signed. I thought I was securing our empire. I did not know I was signing a document that transferred all my rights, all my equity, and all my claims to the property directly to him, leaving me with absolutely nothing but the clothes on my back. I signed my own death warrant with a $2,000 pen, 3 months before the engagement party. I thought I was still part of the family. I had arranged a lunch with Ethan at a French bistro downtown. I wore my best suit, the one I had saved for church, and in my purse, I carried a carefully written list of upcoming medical expenses. My knees were starting to give out, and I needed to discuss assisted living options for the future. I was prepared to beg, but I was not prepared to be negotiated with. Ethan did not come alone. He arrived flanked by a young man in a charcoal suit who introduced himself as an associate from Blackridge and Cole. They did not order food, they ordered mineral water. Mom, Ethan said, folding his hands on the white tablecloth. We need to talk about your living situation, for the sake of the brand, and for your own mental health. I think it is time you moved out of Hawthorne Ridge. I blinked, my hand tightening around my water glass. Moved out, I asked. But that is our home. I put my house money into that. The lawyer slid a black folder across the table. Technically, Ms. Gallagher, the property is solely in Mr. Gallagher's name, as are the restructured assets. The documents you signed last year were quite clear. You have no equity in Northline Vision. You have no claim to the residence. I looked at Ethan. He was checking his watch. Mum, you will be better off if you are independent, he said, his voice smooth and terrible. I cannot have investors thinking I am still tethered to emotional decisions. It looks weak. You need to stand on your own 2 feet. He spoke as if I were 20 years old and refusing to get a job, not a 58-year-old woman who had given him her life savings. The move happened 3 days later. Ethan was not there. He sent a crew of movers who looked at me with pity as I packed my clothes into 3 cheap suitcases. I left behind the furniture I had polished, the curtains I had hemmed, and the garden I had planted. My phone buzzed with a text from him as I sat on the curb waiting for a taxi. I transferred the deposit and 1 month of rent for a place in Brighton Flats. After that, you have to handle it yourself. Brighton Flats was a basement unit with a window that looked out at a brick wall. It smelled of damp carpet and other people's cooking. I got a job as a night cashier at a discount grocery store because no one else would hire a woman my age with a gap in her resume. Every night, I scanned cans of near-expired soup and bruised apples, the kind of food I had starved myself to ensure Ethan never had to eat. The humiliation did not stop at poverty. Rumours started trickling back to me. I heard from a former neighbour that Ethan was telling people, his board members, his rich friends, that he had to cut me off because I was unstable. He told them I had a spending addiction. He painted a picture of a tragic, leeching mother to justify his cruelty. One night at the store, a regular customer named Mr. Luther came through my line. He was an old man with kind eyes, a retired civil rights lawyer who bought cat food and peppermint tea every Tuesday. He heard me arguing with my landlord on the phone about a late fee I could not pay. "Ma'am," he said quietly as I bagged his tea, "I do not mean to pry, but what you are describing with your son, taking your assets, isolating you, controlling your access to money, that sounds like elder financial abuse. It is a crime." I shook my head, handing him his receipt. "No," I said. "He is my son. He is just strict. I do not want to cause trouble for him." That was the mother in me speaking, the foolish woman who still remembered him as a toddler needing his shoes tied. I chose to endure it. I chose to be the victim because fighting back felt like a sin. But that changed tonight. I was sitting on my sagging mattress when my phone pinged. It was a notification from the bank. The small savings account I had managed to keep secret, a rainy day fund with barely $2,000 in it, had been drained. The balance was 0. The transaction note read, "Authorized transfer per power of attorney." He had found the last crumb I had. He did not need the money. He made millions a year. He took it because he could. He took it to show me that I existed only by his permission. I stared at the screen until the light blurred. Something inside my chest. Something that had been soft and yielding for 58 years. Finally snapped. It was a clean break. I did not cry. I set the phone down and looked at my reflection in the dark window. The mother who would die for her son was gone. In her place was a woman who had absolutely nothing left to lose. I stood at the entrance of the grand ballroom, holding my wrinkled invitation like a shield. The security guard, a man with a jaw square enough to break bricks, looked from the cream-coloured card to my worn shoes. He did not say a word, but his eyes said everything. He checked his tablet 3 times before finally unhooking the velvet rope. I walked past him with my head high, ignoring the heat rising in my cheeks. I was crashing my own son's party, and I refused to feel ashamed. Stepping into the lobby was a physical assault on my senses. The air smelled of expensive vanilla and cold champagne. The sound of crystal glasses clinking against each other triggered a memory so sharp it almost brought me to my knees. I remembered holding Ethan's small hand 30 years ago, walking him through hotel lobbies just like this one in the dead of winter because we could not afford to heat our apartment all day. We would pretend we were waiting for someone until the staff asked us to leave. Now, I was the one waiting to be asked to leave. I spotted Ethan near the ice sculpture. He looked like a stranger in his tuxedo, standing tall and confident, He was speaking to a group of men in grey suits. I recognized one of them from the business news as a partner at Silver Point Harbor Capital. I drifted closer, hiding behind a massive arrangement of white hydrangeas. "It is about efficiency," Ethan was saying, swirling his drink. "You have to be willing to cut off ineffective assets. If it does not grow, it rots." I made the hard choice to sanitize the cap table. I felt a chill run down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I was the ineffective asset. I was the rot he had sanitized. I stepped out from behind the flowers. I needed him to see me. I needed him to look me in the eye. "Ethan," I said. He turned. For a split second, his mask slipped, and I saw pure annoyance. Then the CEO mask slid back into place. He put a hand on my shoulder, not in affection, but to steer me away from the investors. "Gentlemen," he said, his voice tight, "this is a distant relative from Redford. She just stopped by to wish us well. He did not call me Mum. He did not even call me by my name." He turned his back on me before I could speak, dismissing me as if I were a waitress who had dropped a tray. I stood there, frozen. That was when I felt eyes on me. Camilla was standing 5 feet away. She was not drinking. She was watching the interaction with a laser focus, the kind of look a doctor gives a patient who is hiding a symptom. Ethan grabbed her hand and pulled her toward me. "Camilla, this is an old family friend," he said breezily. "Nora." Camilla looked at Ethan, then at me. Her brow furrowed. There was a flicker of confusion in her dark eyes, a calculation that did not add up. She opened her mouth to speak, but Ethan whisked her away for a toast. I waited until the speeches were over. I could not breathe in that room anymore. I turned to find the exit, but before I could reach the heavy double doors, a hand clamped around my wrist. It was Camilla. She did not smile. She did not look like a blushing bride. She pulled me with surprising strength away from the crowd, through a door marked "Staff Only," and into a quiet service corridor lined with stacks of extra chairs. The silence here was heavy. She reached into her small beaded clutch and pulled out a photograph. It was old. The corners bent. The colors faded to orange and yellow. It showed a young woman with wild curly hair holding a baby, standing next to a teenage boy on a rocky beach. I gasped. The woman was me. Camilla held the photo up, her hand trembling slightly. She leaned in close, her voice barely a whisper. "Are you the mother of—" Adam Gallagher, the world tilted on its axis. I had not heard that name spoken aloud in 25 years. Adam, my firstborn, Ethan's older brother. "Adam died," I managed to say, my throat closing up. "He died in the accident. The building collapse. It was not an accident," Camilla whispered. Her eyes were wet, but her jaw was set like stone. "My sister. She was in apartment 4B. She died that day too." I stared at her. The grief I had buried under layers of concrete and time began to crack open. "I grew up watching my parents try to sue the developers," Camilla said, the words rushing out now. "They were crushed by legal fees. But I know who built that complex. I know the shell companies involved. And I found a connection, a money trail that leads to the seed funding for Northline Vision." She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw what she really was. She was not a fiancée in love. She was a hunter. "I did not say yes to the ring because I love him," Camilla hissed, looking back at the door to ensure we were alone. "I need access to his private archives. I need to know if he used blood money to build his empire. But I cannot do it alone. I need someone who knows where he came from. I need his mother. We met the next morning at a roadside diner called the Iron Skillet, a place where the menu was sticky with syrup and the air smelled of bacon grease and diesel. It was the kind of place truckers stopped to refuel on their way out of Denver, far removed from the polished marble and crystal of Ethan's world. I arrived 10 minutes early and ordered a black coffee. My hands were shaking so bad I had to grip the mug with both palms to keep it steady. When Camilla walked in, she looked different. Gone was the silk gown and the carefully pinned hair. She wore a grey oversized sweatshirt and jeans, her face scrubbed clean of makeup. She slid into the booth opposite me, not looking like a doctor or a trophy fiancée, but like a woman who had not slept in days. She did not order anything. Instead, she reached into her tote bag and pulled out a thick stack of photocopied documents. She pushed them across the chipped Formica table. "Read the highlighted parts," Camilla said, her voice low and hard. I looked down. The top page was an audit report for something called the Redford Renewal Fund. I remembered that name. It was supposed to be a charity initiative launched after the collapse, a promise to rebuild the neighborhood where my Adam died. "I do not understand," I said, squinting at the small print. This was supposed to help the victims. "Look at the cash flow. Nora," Camilla urged, tapping the paper with a manicured fingernail. The fund raised millions, but only 10% went to reconstruction. The rest was funneled into consulting fees for 3 shell companies: Gallagher Urban Holdings, Brightview Equity, and a third one called Apex Limit. I turned the page. My breath hitched. There were emails. Internal correspondence printed on Northline Vision letterhead. I recognized Ethan's clipped, arrogant writing style immediately. In one email dated 5 years ago, a project manager asked about the safety retrofits for the remaining buildings in the Redford block. Ethan's reply was highlighted in neon yellow: "Skip the structural reinforcement. We need that capital for the Series A launch. Put it down as deferred maintenance and move the surplus to the holding accounts. Let us call it financial creativity." Financial creativity, I whispered, the words tasting like bile. He knew the buildings were unsafe. He knew, Camilla said, and he used the money meant to fix them to build his own company. He built Northline Vision on the graveyard of our family members. I felt sick. My son was not just a greedy man who discarded his mother. He was a monster who had profited from the tragedy that killed his own brother. I wanted to tear the paper apart. I wanted to scream. But I just sat there, frozen in the orange vinyl booth. "This is fraud," Camilla continued, her voice clinical now, the doctor taking over. "It is money laundering. And what he did to you, taking your house, draining your accounts while you were under the influence of post-surgery medication that is elder financial abuse. If we put this together right, Nora, we can send him to prison for 20 years. The word prison made me flinch. Even after everything, the instinct to protect him flared up. A useless, shriveled reflex. "I cannot," I said, pushing the papers away. "He is my son. I cannot be the one to put him in a cage. I just want him to understand. To be sorry." Camilla looked at me, and her eyes softened, but the steel remained. She reached across the table and took my hand. "Nora, look at me." I engaged myself to a man I despise just to get these passwords. I sleep next to him and feel my skin crawl because I need justice for my sister. But you need to realize something. She paused, letting the noise of the diner fade around us. If he can do this to his mother, if he can look at the woman who gave him life and treat her like a broken appliance, what do you think he will do to his own children one day? The question hit me like a slap. I thought of a little boy with Ethan's eyes, a child who did not exist yet, being treated as an asset, manipulated, or discarded when he ceased to be useful. He is not going to stop, Camilla said. Unless we stop him. What do you want to do? I asked, my voice trembling. The courts take too long, and his lawyers are expensive. Camilla said, leaning in. We need something undeniable. We need a confession, not on paper, where he can claim it was a mistake or blame a subordinate. We need to hear him say it. He will never admit it. I said. He is too smart. He is arrogant. Camilla corrected. And he thinks you are stupid. He thinks you are a senile old woman who does not understand business. We are going to use that. We are going to make him feel so safe, so superior, that he will brag about it. I looked at the emails again. I looked at the line where he called the safety of human beings a line item to be cut. I thought about Adam, buried in the ground for 25 years. I thought about myself, scanning cans of beans while my son drank champagne. Okay, I said. The word was small, but it was solid. Okay, Camilla asked. We will get him? I said, straightening my back. We will make him say it. Camilla nodded, and for the first time, she smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of a soldier who had just found a partner in the trenches. We were not going to rewrite the past, but we were going to make sure the future knew exactly who Ethan Gallagher really was. I was done being the victim. I was done being the mother he was ashamed of. I was about to become the one thing he never calculated for a liability he could not write off. Camilla took me to a small brick building in a neighborhood where the lawns were mostly dirt. This was the office of Monroe and Slate. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and peppermint. Celeste Monroe was a woman who looked like she could stare down a grizzly bear and make it apologize. She had steel grey hair cut in a sharp bob and wore glasses on a chain around her neck. She did not offer me tea. She offered me a seat and opened the file of documents I had signed. November 12th, Celeste said, tapping a date on the transfer deed. Mrs. Gallagher, do you recall where you were on November 10th? I thought back. I had my gallbladder removed. I was home, taking those heavy painkillers the doctor gave me. Celeste smiled, a sharp, predatory expression. Exactly. Your son had you sign away your life savings while you were high on post-surgical narcotics. That alone makes this contract voidable. But there is more. She pulled out a yellow document from the bottom of the stack. This is the care trust you set up with your late husband. It explicitly states that the core assets, your original house money, cannot be transferred without 2 independent witnesses present. Were there witnesses? Nora. Just Ethan, I said. And his expensive pen. Then he broke the law. Celeste said satisfyingly, This is not just bad business. It is theft. While Celeste built the legal wall, Camilla was working the psychological angle. She had used her clearance to speak with a former patient, a man who had been the chief accountant for the Redford Renewal Fund. He had been admitted for severe anxiety. With his permission, Camilla played me a recording of their session. The tape hissed, and then a man's voice spoke, trembling. Mr. Gallagher told me to make the numbers look right. The voice on the tape stammered. He said if I did not move the capital to the holding companies, the project would fail anyway. He called it creative figures. He promised me shares if I kept quiet. My hands shook as I listened. My son was not just a thief. He was a corrupter. To connect the dots. Celeste hired Marcus Hayes, a private investigator who looked more like a plumber than a spy. He laid out a flowchart on Celeste's desk that looked like a plate of spaghetti. "Follow the green line," Marcus said, pointing with a thick finger. "Money leaves the Redford Renewal Fund here. It goes into a shell company called Gallagher Urban Holdings in Delaware. Then it moves to Brightview Equity in the Caymans. And finally, it lands right here." He tapped a circle at the end. An account controlled solely by Ethan Gallagher. We had the map of the crime, but we needed to know the current layout of the castle. That was where I came in. I put on my oldest, most fraying cardigan and took a bus to the glass tower of Northline Vision. I walked up to the front desk, clutching a fake medical form. "Hello, dear," I said to the receptionist, making my voice wobble. "I am Ethan's mother. I just need him to sign this. Oh, I am so confused by all these papers." The receptionist looked at me with pity. She did not see a threat. She saw a harmless old lady. She let me sit in the waiting area on the executive floor while she tried to reach his assistant. As soon as she turned her back, I was up. I wandered down the hall, phone in hand, snapping pictures of the organizational charts and shareholder maps framed on the walls. I captured the names of the board members, the equity splits, everything. I paused outside the boardroom door, which was slightly ajar. Ethan was inside. I could hear his voice, confident and booming. "It is a clean slate," he was saying to someone. "Just understand that I killed all emotional legacy from Redford, including people and bricks. We are strictly looking forward." I stood there, clutching my purse to my chest. People and bricks. That was all my life amounted to in his ledger. I backed away before I could be seen. The recording of his cruelty etched into my memory. Back at the apartment, I dug out my old laptop. It took 20 minutes to boot up. But I found them. Emails from 5 years ago. Hundreds of them. In one. Ethan had written, "Mom, this transfer is just a formality. I swear on Dad's grave that I will keep this asset for you for life. You will never have to worry." I printed it out. It was a promise in black and white. A promise he had shredded the moment it became profitable. We reconvened at Celeste's office late that night. The table was covered in evidence: the voided contract, the witnessless trust, the accountant's confession, the money trail, and my photos. "We have enough for a civil suit," Celeste said, rubbing her temples. "We can get your money back. Eventually. We can even get the district attorney to look at the fraud. But Ethan has a team of lawyers who charge $1,000 an hour. They will drag this out for 10 years. They will claim the accountant is crazy. They will claim you are senile." "So what do we do?" Camilla asked. "We need a nail in the coffin," Celeste said, looking at us grimly. "We need something no jury can ignore and no lawyer can spin. We need a confession. We need him to admit, on tape, that he knew exactly what he was doing with your money and that he knew the Redford buildings were unsafe." I looked at the picture of Adam I had taped to the file folder. "I will get it," I said. "I know exactly where to trap him." Celeste laid the plan out on her mahogany desk like a general planning a siege. The target was the wedding resort. The weapon was a private meeting. And the bait was me. "He will be distracted," Celeste said, her voice sharp and precise. "He will be high on adrenaline and arrogance. He wants this wedding to be the coronation of his perfect life. If we offer him a chance to make the problem, that is you, Nora, go away quietly with a check, he will take it. We drafted the letter together. It was a masterpiece of submission. I wrote that I was tired of fighting, that I was old and scared of poverty, and that I would sign a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for a modest monthly allowance. It was exactly what Ethan wanted to hear. It confirmed his belief that everyone had a price and that his mother was just another expense to be managed. Camilla played her part perfectly. She told me later how she had sat on the edge of their bed, massaging Ethan's shoulders while he read my letter. "You should meet her. Ethan," she had whispered to him. "Pay her off. Get her to sign the papers so she cannot ruin our big day with some pathetic scene. Do it for us." He had smiled, kissed her forehead, and called his lawyer to draft a settlement. He thought he was clearing the decks. He did not know he was walking into a kill box. 2 days before the wedding, Marcus Hayes went to work. He checked into the resort as a guest, while housekeeping was cleaning the small conference room Ethan had reserved for our meeting. Marcus installed a camera the size of a pinhead inside the smoke detector. Then he turned to us. He handed Camilla a pearl hair clip. "Microphone in the clasp," Marcus said. "Keep your head up." Then he handed me a string of heavy wooden prayer beads. "The transmitter is in the center bead," he explained. "Do not cover it with your hand. And Nora, if you start crying, try not to sob directly onto it." The training was the hardest part. Celeste drilled me for hours. I had to learn to ask leading questions without sounding like an interrogator. I had to learn to play the confused, defeated old woman, so Ethan would feel safe enough to brag. "He needs to explain the fraud to you," Celeste said, pacing the room. "You have to make him feel smart. Ask him how he moved the money. Ask him why he had to do it. Act stupid. Nora, act helpless. I want to scream at him." I admitted, my hands clenching into fists. "If you scream, we lose the tape," Celeste said, stopping in front of me. "If you scream, his lawyers will claim you are hysterical and unreliable. But if you are quiet, if you let him dig his own grave, we win." While we prepared the trap, Celeste filed a preliminary complaint with the Securities and Exchange Commission and the District Attorney's Office. She included just enough of the financial trail to pique their interest, but promised the smoking gun would follow within 48 hours. The clock was ticking. We had created a pressure cooker, and the lid was about to blow. Camilla reported back to us every night. She looked thinner, her eyes hollow. "He is happy," she told us, her voice vibrating with disgust. "He told me tonight that his mother finally got realistic. He said he is going to offer you $50,000 to disappear. He thinks he is being generous." The night before the meeting, I could not sleep. I lay in the stiff hotel bed, staring at the ceiling. My mind kept drifting back 30 years. I remembered the night Ethan was born in a county hospital, how he screamed when he took his first breath. I remembered the day I taught him to ride a bike, running behind him until my lungs burned, terrified he would fall. I loved that boy more than my own life. But then I remembered the cold look in his eyes when he told me to move out of the house I had paid for. I remembered the name Adam and the brother he had sacrificed for profit. I was torn in two. Half of me wanted to run away, to let him keep the money if it meant I did not have to destroy my own son. The other half knew that if I did not stop him, he would do this to someone else. The morning of the meeting, I stood in front of the full-length mirror in the resort room. I was wearing a simple grey dress Camilla had bought for me. My face was lined with deep grooves of worry, but my eyes were dry. I touched the prayer beads around my neck. I took a deep breath. The Nora who scanned groceries and cried over unpaid bills was gone. The mother who forgave every slight was gone. This time, I said to my reflection, my voice steady, he is not talking to his mother. He is talking to the woman he swindled. I opened the door and walked out to meet him. Ethan entered the small conference room at the resort like a man checking off a minor annoyance on a busy schedule. He carried a sleek leather portfolio and left his personal lawyer standing in the hallway, closing the door with a firm click. He checked his platinum watch, barely glancing at me. I have the rehearsal in 45 minutes. Mom, he said, sitting down at the opposite end of the polished table. Let us make this quick. You said you wanted to settle. I fingered the wooden beads around my neck, ensuring the center bead was facing him. I slumped my shoulders, making myself look smaller, older, and defeated. I am sorry to disturb you. Ethan, I said, keeping my voice low and trembling. I do not want to ruin your big day. I am tired of living in a basement. I cannot afford my heart medication. I just want a small allowance. I will sign whatever you want. The tension in Ethan's shoulders dropped. He let out a sigh that was half relief, half contempt. He slid a document across the table. I am glad you are finally being reasonable, he said. I have prepared a check for $50,000. It is a one-time gift. In exchange, you sign this non-disclosure agreement and a retroactive confirmation of asset transfer. I picked up the paper. My hands shook, partly from nerves, partly from the act. I pretended to read the legal jargon slowly, squinting at the page. Ethan? I asked, pointing to paragraph 4. Why does this say? I acknowledge I was of sound mind and body, free from the influence of any pharmaceuticals. On the day I signed the house over, he drummed his fingers on the table. Standard boilerplate. Mom, just sign it. But I was on those strong painkillers, I said, looking up at him with wide, confused eyes. I do not remember much of that night, and you did not bring a doctor or a witness. Ethan groaned, his patience snapping. He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. That is exactly why you need to sign this now, he hissed. I handled that transfer personally. I made sure there were no doctors around to document your state. I cleared the room so no one could testify you were high. I protected the asset transfer so it would be airtight. Do not make me undo my hard work because you are suddenly growing a conscience. I felt the recorder against my chest burn, but I kept my face blank. He had just admitted to undue influence and isolation. I needed more. I needed the Redford Fund. You always were so smart with business, I said, shifting gears to stroke his ego, like with that town. Redford. I heard people saying you were a hero for cleaning up that mess. Ethan leaned back, a smug smile touching his lips. The flattery worked like a charm. I did what had to be done, he said, straightening his cuffs. That whole project was a financial sinkhole. I simply reallocated the resources. Why pour millions into reinforcing concrete in a dead neighborhood when I could funnel that capital into high-yield tech startups? I took the money out of the maintenance budget and put it where it could actually grow. That is not fraud. Mum, that is vision. But the people? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The families living there. Did you not worry about the safety reports? He laughed. A cold, sharp sound. Business is not charity. Those people lived in low-income housing. They knew the risks. If you want safety, you pay a premium. You do not get to live on handouts and then complain about the quality of the bricks. I felt bile rise in my throat. I had to go further. I had to say the name. But Adam lived there. I said, looking him dead in the eye, "Your brother. He died in that collapse." Ethan slammed his hand on the table, making me jump. "Stop it," he shouted. "Do not drag up dead people to guilt-trip me. I know exactly who was in that building. Do not think you can use his ghost to squeeze more money out of me." "He was your brother?" I whispered. He was 20 years old. Ethan stood up, his face twisted in a sneer that made him look unrecognizable. He was a statistic. Ethan spat. And honestly, it was bad timing. If that building had collapsed just 3 months earlier, I would have saved a fortune on the liability payouts because the insurance policy hadn't kicked in yet. That delay cost me $2 million. The room went silent. The air felt sucked out of the space. He had just wished his brother had died sooner to save money. I looked at him, and the last shred of maternal instinct I had turned to ash. He pushed the pen toward me, his composure returning as if he hadn't just said something monstrous. "Sign the paper." "Mom, take the 50,000 and go." I looked at the pen. Then I looked at him. I stood up slowly, my legs feeling surprisingly steady. I did not take the pen. "No," I said. "Excuse me?" he asked, blinking. I said no. I repeated, "If you are so sure you did the right thing, Ethan, then you will not be afraid to explain it to a judge." I turned and walked to the door. "You are making a mistake," he called after me, his voice echoing off the walls. "You have nothing. No one will believe you." I closed the door behind me, his shouts muffled by the heavy wood. He thought I was walking away empty-handed. He had no idea I was carrying his entire coffin around my neck. The sun was setting over the resort garden, casting long, golden shadows across the lawn that looked like bars of a prison cell. The air was thick with the scent of imported white roses and the soft, expensive hum of a live jazz band. Every chair was filled with the elite of Denver. The partners from Silver Point Harbor Capital were there, along with the board members of Northline Vision, all sipping champagne and congratulating themselves on backing a winner. I sat in the very last row, squeezed between a decorative fern and a waiter's station, exactly where Ethan had placed me to keep me out of sight. Ethan stood at the altar under a canopy of orchids. He looked like the golden boy of the American dream. He held Camilla's hand and spoke into the microphone, his voice trembling with practiced emotion. "This company, this life, it is all built on trust," Ethan said, looking out at the crowd. "It is built on family and the legacy we leave behind." I gripped the back of the chair in front of me. The hypocrisy tasted like copper in my mouth. The minister cleared his throat. "If anyone here has just cause why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace." The silence that followed was polite and expected, but I did not hold my peace. I stood up. My knees popped, and my dress felt cheap against the silk of the other guests. But my voice was steady. "I have a question," I said. It came out raspy, so I cleared my throat and spoke louder. "I have a question for the bride." Heads turned. 300 people looked at me as if I were a stain on a white tablecloth. Ethan's smile froze, then twisted into a look of panic. "Camilla," I called out, my voice cutting through the garden air. Are you sure you want to marry the man who just wished the building collapsed 3 months earlier so he could save on compensation money? The silence that fell over the garden was heavy and suffocating. A bird chirped somewhere, sounding absurdly cheerful. Ethan laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. "Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize," he said, gesturing for security. "My mother she is struggling with some mental health issues. She forgets things. She is confused. I am not confused. Mr. Gallagher," a sharp voice rang out from the entrance. Celeste Munro walked onto the grass, flanked by two stern-looking men in cheap suits. "I am Celeste Munro, legal counsel for Mrs. Gallagher," she announced. "And these are representatives from the district attorney's office. On the altar." Camilla moved. She did not look at Ethan. She reached up and unclipped the pearl barrette from her hair. She handed it to the man on her left. Then, from the back of the stage, Marcus Hayes stepped out and hit a button on a laptop connected to the massive projector screen that was meant for a slideshow of childhood photos. A surprise gift for the groom, Marcus shouted. The screen flickered to life. It was the grainy footage from the conference room just hours ago. Ethan's face was huge, distorted by the angle, but his voice was crystal clear, booming over the high-quality speakers meant for wedding vows. "I made sure there were no doctors around to document your state," the Ethan on the screen hissed. "I cleared the room so no one could testify you were high." A gasp rippled through the crowd. I saw a woman in the second row cover her mouth. Then the video cut to the part that would end him. If that building had collapsed just 3 months earlier, I would have saved a fortune on the liability payouts because the insurance policy bad not kicked in yet. That delay cost me $2 million. The reaction was visceral. The partners from Silver Point Harbor Capital looked like they had swallowed glass. These were men who prided themselves on ethical investing, at least in public. An older woman near the front whispered loud enough for me to hear. "That is elder abuse. That is monster behavior." Reporters, who Celeste had tipped off and smuggled in as catering staff, pulled notebooks out of their aprons and started writing furiously. Ethan lunged for the projector cord. "Turn it off," he screamed, his face turning purple. "It is out of context. Turn it off." Two security guards, who had been briefed by Marcus earlier, stepped in his way, arms crossed. Ethan was trapped on his own stage. When the video faded to black, Camilla took the microphone. She was shaking, but she stood tall. She turned to Ethan, who was panting like a cornered animal. "My sister was in apartment 4B, Camilla said. Her voice was quiet, terrifyingly calm. "I know about the Redford Renewal Fund. Ethan, I know you funneled the safety money into your startup. I spent the last year hoping I was wrong. I hoped you had a conscience." She looked at him with a disgust so profound it looked like physical pain. "But you do not see people," she continued. "You only see numbers. You see your own mother as a liability to be liquidated." She pulled the diamond ring off her finger. It caught the last light of the sunset, sparkling with a beauty that felt obscene. "I cannot marry a man who treats his mother like a broken asset," she said, dropping the ring into his palm. "Because I know exactly what you will do to me the day I am no longer useful." She turned and walked down the aisle, past the stunned guests, past the horrified investors, and stopped next to me. She took my hand. Ethan stood alone on the stage, the ring clutched in his fist, while the sirens of police cars began to wail in the distance, getting louder with every second. He looked at the crowd, begging for an ally. But all he found was a sea of backs turning away from him. The months following the wedding were not filled with champagne or celebrations, but with the cold, hard fluorescent lights of courtrooms. Ethan found himself fighting a war on two fronts. On one side was my civil suit for elder financial abuse and fraudulent conveyance. On the other was a criminal investigation into the Redford Renewal Fund that threatened to put him away for a very long time. During the civil trial, Ethan's legal team tried to destroy me. They painted a picture of a confused, elderly woman with a spending addiction who had been saved from bankruptcy by her benevolent son. It was a cruel narrative, but it crumbled the moment the judge heard the audio recording from the resort. Coupled with the old emails I had dug up from my laptop, the evidence was overwhelming. The judge ruled that every transfer I had signed was void due to undue influence, deceit, and lack of capacity. The deed to the Hawthorne Ridge estate and my original shares in Northline Vision were returned to me. I was a millionaire again, but the money felt heavy, like it was weighted down by 25 years of lies. The criminal case was far uglier. The accountant Camilla had found testified in exchange for immunity, detailing exactly how Ethan had used shell companies to siphon money away from the safety retrofits. Camilla took the stand as a witness, her voice steady as she connected the dots between the missing funds and the structural failure that killed her sister and my Adam. Desperate to avoid a maximum sentence, Ethan's lawyer approached Celeste with a deal. Ethan would plead guilty to a lesser charge if I wrote a letter to the judge asking for leniency. They wanted me to play the role of the forgiving mother one last time. I went to see him at the detention center. He sat behind the plexiglass, looking thinner and paler than I had ever seen him. He did not ask how I was. "Mom?" he said, his voice cracking. "You have to write that letter. If you do not, I could get 10 years. You cannot let them do that to me." I looked at him. I looked for the baby I had nursed, the boy I had taught to read. But all I saw was a man who had calculated the cost of his brother's life and found it acceptable. I cannot write it. "Ethan," I said softly. "Why not?" he demanded, slamming his hand against the glass. "You are my mother. You are supposed to protect me. I protected you your whole life." I replied, "I protected you from hunger. I protected you from the cold. But now, it is time for other people to be protected from you." He stared at me, a flicker of genuine fear in his eyes for the first time. "Are you even my mother anymore?" he whispered. "I am still your mother," I said, standing up. "But I am no longer the shield you hide behind when you do terrible things." I walked out of the visitation room, leaving him alone with his reflection. The judge showed no mercy. Ethan was sentenced to 12 years in federal prison for fraud and financial abuse. He was banned from serving as an officer of any public company and ordered to pay restitution to the victims of the Redford collapse. Northline Vision was placed under new management, stripping the company of the Gallagher name. I did not keep the mansion in Hawthorne Ridge. I sold it to a developer and took the money back to Redford. I bought a small, sunny house with a porch that looked out over the mountains. With the rest of the settlement, I started the Adam and Elena Fund, named after my son and Camilla's sister. We provide legal aid and emergency funds for elderly people who have been financially exploited by their own families. Camilla comes to visit often. She brings her psychology students to the center to learn about the signs of financial abuse. Yesterday, I sat on my porch swing, watching her walk up the path with a group of bright-eyed interns. She waved at me, her smile genuine and warm. "Mom," she called out, "come meet the new team." She calls me Mom now. It is not because of biology or marriage. It is out of respect. I stood up, my knees creaking but holding strong. I looked at those young people, just starting their lives, and I thought about the journey that brought me here. I cleared my throat and prepared to tell them my story, the same way I am telling you now. If one day, the child you raised looks at you and asks how much you are worth in their ledger, how will you answer? I know my answer now. I am priceless. Not because of what I own, but because I refused to let anyone, even my own son, determine my value. Revenge was never the destination. The destination was taking back the dignity he tried to steal. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. So please drop your city or country in the comments below so we can see how far this family reaches. If this story touched you, please subscribe to Grandma's Family Diary, hit that like button, and smash the hype button to help us share these important lessons with more people who might need to hear them. Stay strong and take care of yourselves.